we both grew up here and had like overlapping or nearly overlapping social circles, but like we kind of covered a wide spread, I feel like, of like kids growing up in town here. And soccer was all over the place from my point of view. I played, my brother played, everybody played. There were like rec leagues in every park. They all had like cool colored jerseys with the league's logo on them. And like my school teams were kind of serious at times, but no one I knew watched soccer, professional soccer, until 10 years ago. Was that the same case for you? Or
No, for me, it was very different. I mean, I have memories of kids telling teachers they weren't going to show up for final exams. I can't remember if it was junior or senior year of high school. It was junior year because like they mattered. People weren't into college yet because it was the World Cup and the games were like playing in the morning and they were just not going to be at school because I went to international school. So a lot of my friends, it was what they lived and breathed.
Right. I was going to ask immediately, like, do you think it was because you went to the international school?
100%. And like colored my relationship to it in a way that absolutely shaped how I think about the game today.
So did it start then for you? Like, were you into it as a kid?
Yeah. Like, I don't know what happened at other schools, like during lunch and recess, like we would always play soccer for as long as I can remember. That was always what my friends wanted to do. That was the game. Even as at home, it was the other football, right? Like, or baseball or whatever other more common American sport to watch.
That was the case at my house too, but it was also what I was into.
Yeah.
And so like there's probably lots of minutes of podcast or hours or years of podcast spilled on this question of like, what is up with the United States and soccer?
Yeah.
But the thing I'm particularly wondering about is why that was the case, given that the kids play soccer here to an extent that may not be the extent that they do in streets of South American cities, but like certainly was happening every weekend for a lot of my friends. Why do you think that like the professional game and the game seem to be different phenomena? Do you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it comes down to certain segments of America's proclivity to be, there is no part of the world outside of the United States and America. And then there's others of us who look for inspiration and with curiosity to other parts of the world and how things happen. And I think soccer falls into that, right? Like, I think the Olympics is probably the gateway drug to soccer of like, oh, whoa, there's other countries with people who care about sports with balls and excitement and energy. And then you learn about like these foreign leagues and like, I don't know, the Champions League is this fascinating concept of like this super meta competition that, you know, you just keep going with it.
You know, now that you mentioned the Olympics, I'm beginning to remember that Olympic soccer competition was the first like breakthrough international soccer competition in my childhood environment. And it's a very interesting question to me. I mean, it's not, it's not much of a question. Like, I think it was the United States is competing in a soccer thing, but we can beat other countries. So like that was an interesting gateway. But that inward focus of like what sports means on a day in and day out basis in the United States, what everything means on a day in and day out basis versus the rest of the world, I think seems really key. And like, I wonder what, like now when I said 10 years ago, people started watching soccer around me, that's because professional American soccer became a phenomenon then. And I wonder like, as someone who has the perspective of like having followed international soccer, like, what do you think the advent of an American pro soccer league means to the game overall and to Americans?
I mean, I think it doesn't have that big of an impact on the game overall. Like I would say it creates a nice cushy retirement for players, but like that's what the Chinese league was a couple of years ago. The Saudi Arabian league is probably like the cushier one right now. It maybe gives a better on-ramp for American players into the game, but then you look at like Weston McKennie, Pulisic, like no, actually like the European clubs are doing a great job of that. And if you're American and serious, you go overseas. So I think it probably gives like the soccer diaspora and expats in the US like a home for their love and fandom to pour that into these local teams. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think you go to Atlanta United games, just like the supporter culture is totally different than a Braves or a Falcons game. And I think that rings true with my experiences at games, you know, overseas in other countries.
But do you think it's getting fans into the bigger world of soccer from here?
Maybe, but also like those same clubs and leagues are spending billions of dollars trying to promote their game here. True. So which is having the bigger influence? Yeah. Like it's hard to say. You know, I think like people loved Messi even before he played for Inter Miami, and like people were buying his jersey. So, and maybe that's just also me that I'm a little more dismissive of MLS because I still haven't gotten into it really.
Yeah. Well, I did try and it was kind of hard. And then like I watched enough like Premier League games to see what like the real competitive level of soccer is at in the world, and it was kind of hard to watch MLS after that. I'm wondering like where like what do you I mean I know what teams you support, but like what is the level of the game that you enjoy day in and day out?
I mean I love playing.
Yeah.
I love playing, and then I love like the stories and the narratives. I love, you know, the team I support, Tottenham. I love the story around what's happening and like the meta cycles of one year to a next, what is happening with a team. I think those two different levels of playing and then watching, you know, almost never in person. It's, you know, a pirated stream off the internet, or reading articles about what's happening with teams are like the two primary modes of consuming soccer.
So I have noticed that I think in general, sports fandom around me at least, but like everyone I know who's been into sports my whole life has gotten more narrative in recent years. And I think that some of that has to do with like statistics culture, right? Because you can tell more stories about the game now that everything's being tracked by computers. But also I think that there's like the surrounding media, like reading stories is the one that you just described, but there's like lots of other ways that people keep up with like the players and what's going on with them.
I mean, who was that columnist for ESPN who went on his own, started Grantland or something like
Simmons?
Yeah, like this like insane number of words about sports. Like that's the first guy I really remember reading like that.
Yeah,
and you know the same, but now about the things I care about, soccer.
So soccer though, like I remember hearing the stories of the greatest soccer players in like biographical terms from before that, and like what the streets of what like favela in Brazil they grew up in and stuff, and like what the game, like what they played with tin cans then, you know, or something like amazing details like that. It seems like soccer has, especially as like an international phenomenon, like the world's sport, has like a unifying narrative effect on humanity, like akin to religious. It's almost bigger than religion because
akin
it's
to
like,
what the night sky used to be.
Yes, exactly. The question I have about this phenomenon though is actually about your playing now. Like, do you feel like part of the story playing with the people that you play with here in town?
I mean, for me as a kid, soccer was played in French. Like that was the language of soccer. And then in my 20s, it was more Spanish. And now I play once or twice a week at my old school field with my high school French teacher. So the narrative aspect is strong. I think of the different places I've played around the world and the people I played with. And I think that like sense of connection to the rest of humanity was probably stronger there. This point of bringing together with other across languages, across cultures. I think one of the things that makes it harder for me is I'm not very good. So I'm not one of those people who could just walk onto any field and instantly, without reservation, add value. But I find my way.
I wonder how, I understand why that would be difficult for you subjectively, but I wonder, like, I haven't played a lot of pickup soccer.
Yeah.
I haven't really played soccer since I was in rec leagues as a kid at all, other than kicking balls around and not playing a game.
Yeah.
And like, I love to like just take turns shooting on each other and stuff like that. But I based on the way that people who walk onto a field talk about it, I wonder how much that really matters. Like, is it a gatekeeping effect? Like, can you not get into the game you want?
It doesn't matter. I think it's more like enjoying the game you play. And there's different cultures of soccer that can be a little more people just stand around and one guy dribbles a lot, or people just taking shots from range. That's not what I enjoy. If you playing a lot of recreational sports in the US, like the number one thing Americans learn is hustle. Like, give your all, give 120%. And that's me. So if people aren't caring in a pickup game, I'm the guy who's trying too hard and it doesn't quite fit. But if there are more technical players who don't want to run that much, they'll often appreciate having someone who will chase down lost causes and like win the ball back. And that's me.
Yeah. Right. So it's almost like you belong at a higher level of play, recreationally speaking, because because people who want it more appreciate the way that you play.
Yes.
Tell me about like the competitive aspect. Like there's so much about soccer, about following soccer is about like winning it all, right? And like moving up and like not or like avoiding relegation, staying alive. Like what elements of that intensity of competition are present, and what in your at your recreational level? Like how much does winning matter and that sort of thing?
For me, it's not outcome driven. It is all intensity driven. So it's about that intense journey and process and just that high, that energy that I get from it. But it's not at all outcome driven. I've never been on a very winning team in any of my more like serious levels of competition. And then maybe that also is reflected in my fandom. I've never gravitated towards like the absolute best dominant team. I'm more of like a number 2, number 3 type fan, and just, totally love the underdog stories. Like one of the defining moments for me was the Miracle of Istanbul. Liverpool, I think it was beating AC Milan in the Champions League final, overcoming a 3-0 halftime deficit. That's the way I like to play too, is just, just never give up, always give it your all, find a way to work as a team. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. What's beautiful about sport.
Do you play 90-minute games?
No, it's like I'm going to play tonight and we play until it gets dark out or until too many people drop from the heat and humidity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So there's another level of staying alive that has to happen.
Yeah. And like this past Sunday, I was feeling a little under the weather, and my 60-year-old former French teacher was the guy who, after 2 hours of playing in the heat and the humidity, was yelling at everyone why they didn't want to keep going, and like single-handedly like started a third half of the game just through like peer pressuring his students and ex-students.
It's the So it sounds like other people share your value of like need of
Yeah.
wanting to keep it going, and that or at least that you've found people to play with who view it that way and feel that way.
I mean, I don't know, talking about like the American influence on the game and values and how to play, like, so I came back to this game 3 years ago and there was a strong like negging vibe at the game. And then I showed up with some more Ted Lasso energy, like just no. You, especially when you're playing with like teenagers, you can't tear them down.
Yeah.
You got to build them up.
Yeah.
And the culture has shifted.
Wow.
Like even these cynical Frenchmen are like, you know, they're not like just railing on people as hard. They're complimenting each other somewhat sarcastically, but still like it's really changed the vibe to one of positivity. And that's been beautiful to see. And I wonder how it is, you know, in a locker room on one of these pro teams, like what is that vibe? I don't know. I see articles about Tottenham and they're playing board games and just, you know, razzing each other. It looks like a good time.
This is a question that's also related to the locker room that I am not quite sure if this is like an interesting question or not. But are you able, as someone who is into both, are you able to talk about the relationship between soccer and language, and like the, you know, because like you're talking about different cultures on one team, you've experienced that, like, but you can speak to those people in their language, right, in some cases, and that must mean something. And then likewise, I'm thinking about like on a pro team, there are players who can speak English and players who can't, like in an MLS locker room or whatever, wherever the country is, like, you know, it's an international game. So like there's people who can't communicate in any language but soccer.
Yeah.
Like what is that? What is the nature of that tension?
I mean, communication in any relationship is so important. And in sports, it's an often overlooked part of the game. That's also vital. I often play in defense and I'll be the loudest person out there, you know, whether it's, you know, cheering people on the way we're describing or just communicating, positioning, watch out for this. So doesn't matter if there's a language barrier or not, like communication can still be difficult. And then the real soccer nirvana, that transcendent level of the game is with the nonverbal communication, where the mutual reading of the game, you know, other people learning how you play, you learning how they like to play. Like you don't need to talk as much, is the real beauty. I do love, just selfishly, getting to use Spanish or French while playing and bringing in that international aspect of the game, because you don't get that many opportunities in everyday life to bust out some languages that may have been dormant for years.
And soccer is sort of like this. It seems like on the macro level and the micro level, it's like, I don't want to call it an excuse, but it's like a way that a way to bring cultures together with a goal in mind, and and then being able to coordinate that is like a really important skill. I mean, but the thing you're saying about the nonverbal communication of the game, I feel like is essential in understanding what the power of soccer is. And I'm thinking about basketball and ultimate compared to baseball or football, where like as the former being more communicative games, like and soccer maybe most of all, although ultimate kind of works the same way, but like passing back and forth just to figure out what to do, communicating the ball to one another, like and just the meaning of a position of a person being in a certain place on the field.
And the selflessness of a run off the ball, right? Like you're exhausted and you're trusting someone to see you and like throw the disc to you or pass the ball to you. Like that selflessness and self-sacrifice is at the root of like so many difficult conversations in life.